Hi, I'm Dr. Christopher Sutton, and welcome back to my Introduction to GIS video series. In this video, we will continue our examination of GIS data by taking a closer look at raster GIS data. Raster GIS data is a grid-based representation of geographic information, where Earth's surface is divided into a matrix of cells. Each cell in a raster represents a specific geographic area and is assigned a value that corresponds to a characteristic of that area. Raster data is well suited for representing continuous data. You will recall from an earlier video that continuous data are phenomena that do not have well-defined boundaries or have no boundaries, like slope, temperature, elevation, or precipitation. A term that you frequently encounter in raster data is pixel. The term pixel means picture element, which is the smallest unit of information in an image or a raster layer and is synonymous with cell. We can have raster layers made up of very small pixels, very large pixels, or a pixel size somewhere in between. Let's deconstruct a raster layer by looking at how you might find information represented. Here are two types of raster layers, a raster grid and a raster image. What are the differences between these raster data types? A raster grid can be referred to as a single band raster, meaning that each cell stores a single value representing a measured phenomenon. Common examples include elevation and temperature. A raster image typically is a multi-band raster, meaning that each cell contains multiple values corresponding to different bands of the electromagnetic spectrum. In a true color image, spectral bands of visible light are stored in each cell, with values for red, green, and blue bands, representing long, medium, and short visible light wavelengths. A true color raster image closely resembles what the human eye sees. Multispectral images store up to 10 broad spectral bands. Such images are used for land cover classification, agricultural monitoring, and urban planning. Hyperspectral images store data in hundreds of narrow spectral bands, providing highly detailed spectral information. Examples of the use in hyperspectral images in GIS include mineral exploration, environmental monitoring, and tree species classification. When using raster GIS data, it is important to understand spatial resolution. Spatial resolution refers to the level of detail of the data. It determines how finely or coarsely the real world is represented in the raster dataset. Specifically, spatial resolution refers to the size of each cell in the raster layer, measured in ground units, such as meters or feet. For example, if a raster layer has a spatial resolution of 10 meters, each pixel represents a 10 meter by 10 meter area on the ground. In raster data, high-resolution rasters have small cell sizes, meaning each cell represents a small area on the ground. Low-resolution rasters have large cell sizes, meaning each cell represents a large area on the ground. Let's look at some examples of different spatial resolutions in raster data. Here we see a hillshade of a portion of Clear Creek County, Colorado, based on a digital elevation model. Note the difference in detail between 30-meter resolution, 10-meter resolution, and 1-meter resolution. The 30-meter resolution raster is noticeably pixelated because the cells are quite large. At 1-meter resolution, the raster cells are quite small, and we are able to make out much more detail. Let's examine spatial resolution in a different context. Here we have a depiction of Hansen Field, which is the football field at Western Illinois University. Here are the sizes of 1 meter, 10 meter, and 30-meter resolution cells relative to the size of the football field. How many cells are needed to capture the entirety of Hansen Field in a raster layer? Using 30-meter resolution, fully covering the field requires 3 full cells and portions of 5 other cells. Using 10-meter resolution, fully covering the field requires 55 full cells and parts of 17 other cells. At 1 meter resolution, fully covering the field requires 4,674 full cells and parts of 336 other cells. What are some commonly used raster GIS datasets? Satellite imagery and aerial photography contain visual and multispectral data in each cell of the raster layer. Such imagery is used for visualization, environmental monitoring, and change detection. Land use and land cover datasets classify Earth's surface into categories such as forests, urban areas, water bodies, and agricultural land. Elevation data is represented in raster format as digital elevation models, or DEMs. DEMs are used for terrain analysis, hydrology, and 3D modeling. DEMs frequently are used to create other raster datasets. They can include slope, which represents the steepness of terrain. Slope models can be used to identify areas prone to landslides and assessing suitability for agriculture. DEMs can be used to create aspect rasters, which indicate the direction that a slope faces. We use aspect rasters to analyze solar radiation, vegetation patterns, and assessing snowmelt patterns. Hillshades simulate the effect of sunlight on the terrain, creating a 3D-like visualization. They can be quite useful for the visual interpretation of topography. You might encounter a modification of a hillshade where color is used to enhance the hillshade by using color gradients to further distinguish elevation differences. We call such representations hypsometric hillshades. Hypsometric means elevation. As we did with vector GIS data, let's examine the advantages and disadvantages of raster data. Raster data is ideal for representing continuous phenomena like elevation, temperature, rainfall, and land cover. Each cell in the raster can store a value, making it suitable for modeling gradients and smooth transitions. Raster data has a simple data structure. The grid-based format of raster data is straightforward to process and analyze using mathematical and statistical operations. Raster data is the primary format for satellite imagery, aerial photography, and other remote sensing data. It allows for easy integration of multispectral and hyperspectral data for analysis. Raster data is efficient for spatial analysis. Each cell represents the same area on the ground. This uniformity simplifies data processing and analysis. What are the disadvantages of raster data? High-resolution datasets can be very large, requiring significant storage and processing power. For example, high-resolution satellite imagery can require gigabytes or even terabytes of storage space. Because raster data represents features as cells, fine details may be lost, reducing the accuracy of the data. As we saw in the examples of the hillshades in Colorado, raster data can appear pixelated or blocky when zoomed in too far, especially at lower resolutions. This limits its use for applications requiring detailed visualization. Unlike vector data, raster cells typically store a single attribute value, limiting the ability to store multiple attributes for a single location. Finally, editing raster data, modifying individual cells, can be very labor-intensive and is less intuitive than editing vector data. Raster GIS data is a powerful tool for GIS analysis. Understanding raster resolution, data types, and elevation derivatives is key to leveraging its full potential. In the next video, we will wrap up our discussion of GIS data by examining non-spatial data.